The first thing the dragon smelled was blood, and it was not the thin scent of fear it was used to chasing across battlefields, but something warm, steady, and deliberate. It lifted its enormous head from the ashes of the ravine, smoke curling from cracked nostrils, golden eyes sharpening as the metallic sweetness drifted toward it through the cold mountain air. For weeks it had hidden there, wounded and alone, its torn wing dragging uselessly across blackened stone, its scales split by enchanted steel, its heart heavy with the certainty that this time the hunters would finish what they had started. It had expected to die in silence, to become another legend told by frightened villagers around hearthfires. But instead of soldiers, instead of trembling prey, a single human figure stood at the edge of the ravine, holding a cloth bundle dripping red onto the dust. The dragon rose slightly, muscles tightening despite the pain, prepared to unleash the last of its fire. The human did not run. He did not scream. He simply looked up at the creature that had reduced armies to ash and said in a tired, almost bored voice, "Relax, it's only my lunch." His name was Kale, and he had never belonged anywhere long enough for anyone to miss him. He was not a hero, not a chosen child of prophecy, not even particularly brave. He was a dismissed palace scribe who once believed in laws and justice until he discovered how easily both could be twisted. Years ago, when he was young and foolish, he had recorded testimonies about the Great Burning, the night half the capital turned to fire and the king declared dragons to be demons. Kale had read the hidden pages, the sealed confessions, the fragments of ritual instructions written in the king's own trembling hand. He knew the fire had begun in the palace courtyard during a forbidden summoning meant to bind ancient power to the crown. He knew something had gone wrong, and he knew the dragon blamed for the disaster had never even been near the capital that night. When Kale tried to speak, his evidence disappeared, his mentor vanished, and he was quietly removed from his post. Since then, he had wandered the outer villages, unwanted and watched, surviving by hunting in the forests and keeping his head down. He carried guilt heavier than any chain, because he had remained silent when the dragon hunters began their purge. Now he stood in the ravine, holding out raw venison, staring into the eyes of the very creature his silence had condemned. The predator dragon studied him with ancient intelligence. Its body was immense, but there was no triumph in its posture now. Arrows still protruded from its side, black shafts tipped with poison that dulled its fire. A heavy iron collar, etched with runes meant to suppress magic, hung broken around its neck. It had been captured once, paraded through the capital in chains while crowds spat and threw stones. It had endured humiliation rather than burn the innocent. When it finally escaped, it had flown wounded into the mountains, hunted relentlessly ever since. It had lost kin to steel and sorcery. It had watched forests burn because soldiers believed smoke meant evil. It had learned to expect hatred from humans. Yet this one did not smell of hatred. He smelled of regret. Kale slowly unwrapped the cloth and tossed the meat closer. The dragon's claws dug into the earth, but it did not strike him. It devoured the offering in seconds, hunger overriding suspicion. Kale exhaled shakily only after the jaws closed and the creature did not move toward him. "I know what they did to you," he said, his voice carrying across the ravine. "I wrote the lies that justified it. I told myself I had no choice." The dragon's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing the confession. Kale stepped closer, despite every instinct screaming at him to run. "You don't have to trust me," he continued, "but I won't let them finish this." For days he returned with food and water, cleaning wounds as best he could, pulling arrows free while the dragon endured in rigid silence. He expected at any moment to be incinerated, yet the beast never attacked. Sometimes its gaze followed him with something almost like curiosity. Other times it turned its head toward the distant plains where the capital lay, and Kale sensed a storm of memory and restrained fury behind those eyes. In those quiet hours, Kale spoke of things he had never told another living soul. He spoke of the sealed archives, of the ritual circle drawn beneath the palace, of the king's obsession with binding dragonfire to secure eternal rule. He spoke of the night the magic spiraled out of control and tore through the city like a living sun. He spoke of fear, his own fear that had kept him silent when truth mattered most. Word spread quickly in nearby villages that a wounded dragon lurked in the mountains. Fear sharpened into action. The dragon hunters, elite soldiers, clad in silver armor engraved with anti-dragon sigils, were dispatched once more. They rode with grim purpose, led by Captain Rogar, a man who had built his reputation on dragon skulls mounted above city gates. Rogar believed absolutely in the righteousness of his mission. To him, dragons were chaos given flesh. When he heard rumors that someone was aiding the creature, he considered it treason equal to summoning demons. The hunters arrived at dusk, their torches flickering along the ridgeline like a crown of fire. Kale saw them first and felt dread coil in his stomach. The dragon sensed them too. Its body tensed, smoke seeping from its nostrils as rage awakened. "If you fight now, you will die," Kale whispered urgently, placing himself between the beast and the slope. "You're still weak." The dragon's gaze burned past him, toward the approaching soldiers. It would not flee again. It had fled too many times. Arrows rained down before Kale could say another word. One pierced his thigh, dropping him to one knee. Pain exploded through him, hot and blinding. The dragon roared, a sound that shook loose stones from the cliffs. Fire erupted from its jaws, scattering the first wave of hunters. But Rogar advanced through the heat, his armor glowing with protective runes. "There," he shouted. "Finish it." More arrows flew, black with poison. They struck scales already cracked and bleeding. The dragon staggered, its injured wing collapsing beneath it. Kale forced himself up despite the arrow lodged in his leg. He limped forward and spread his arms, standing directly in front of the dragon's heaving chest. "Stop," he shouted hoarsely. "You're killing the wrong creature." Rogar halted only long enough to sneer. "Stand aside, traitor," he said, "or burn with it." Kale shook his head. The fire that destroyed the capital wasn't its doing. It was the king's ritual. "I saw the records." Laughter rippled among the hunters. Rogar raised his sword, the blade humming with enchantment. "Convenient lies," he replied, and lunged. The sword would have split Kale from shoulder to hip if the dragon had not moved faster than its injuries allowed. It twisted, taking the enchanted strike along its own side. The impact tore scales free and drove the beast to its knees. Kale screamed as another arrow struck his shoulder. Blood soaked his tunic. He fell beside the dragon's massive head, pressing a trembling hand against its warm scales. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have spoken sooner." In that moment, something ancient and vast stirred behind the dragon's pain. It had endured chains, humiliation, exile. It had refused to burn cities even when blamed for their destruction. It had chosen restraint over vengeance. And now a single human stood bleeding for it, not out of duty or prophecy, but because truth mattered more than survival. The dragon lowered its head until one blazing eye met Kale's fading gaze. Memories surged between them like a breaking dam. The summoning circle in the palace courtyard, the king's desperate chant, the unstable magic tearing free and searching for a scapegoat. The dragon had sensed the catastrophe from miles away and flown toward the capital to contain it, only to arrive too late. It had absorbed what magic it could, redirecting flame skyward, sparing thousands. For that mercy, it had been branded the villain. Rogar advanced again, preparing the killing blow. "End this," he ordered. Kale pushed himself upright with the last of his strength and stepped directly into the sword's path. Steel pierced his side. The world went silent, except for his ragged breath. He tasted iron. He did not look at Rogar. He looked at the dragon. "Relax," he whispered faintly through blood. "It's only my lunch." The absurdity of the words, spoken at the edge of death, broke something open. Light exploded from the dragon's chest, not red fire, but blinding white radiance that swallowed the ravine. The broken collar shattered into molten fragments. Arrows disintegrated mid-air. The poison burned away like mist before sunrise. The hunters staggered back, shielding their eyes. The dragon rose, wounds knitting, wings unfurling to their full, magnificent span. Its roar was no longer rage, but revelation, echoing across the mountains and down into the plains where the capital stood. Within every hunter's mind rang a voice vast as thunder. "You were lied to." The light surged outward, carrying images clear and undeniable into the minds of all who witnessed it. They saw the king's ritual circle. They saw the unstable magic. They saw the dragon arriving not as destroyer, but as shield. They saw Kale in the archives, reading the hidden truth. Rogar dropped his sword, horror dawning as certainty replaced faith. Around him, soldiers fell to their knees,